Hello, welcome to another practice session. I want to make an announcement first. Next week is Thanksgiving, and even though we're just going to stay in and be by ourselves for Thanksgiving, we still figured we'd treat Thanksgiving week the way that we traditionally have treated it, which is to take the week off. So we will not be doing these sessions next week. Join us again the following week. So we had a question about breathing. So I want to address that a little bit, and Lee will do the same. So one thing I want to do is tell you a little story from Ben Lowe. We'd been studying about 4 months, and Ben came to town, and we did a workshop with him, and somebody asked him about breathing, and he asked the person, "How long have you been studying?" The person said, 6 months, and Ben said, "Ask me again in 6 years." Okay, so 6 years pass, nobody wants to. 10 years pass, like, well, maybe we can ask him now. So we asked Ben, "What about breathing?" And he said, "Well, it's like this. If you just take a pitcher of water and you throw it on the ground, the water just spreads out everywhere. If you dig channels and throw the water down on the ground, it will flow in those channels. The form is the channels. You practice the form and the breath will flow through those channels." So there's one story. What that says to me is that actually the body also has to be an open channel. It's not enough to just do the form. You have to make your body be the open channel that the breath can flow through too. So let's do a little bit of the crane, and that's a really great one for looking at breathing because it's opening the lungs and really you can really feel it. So let's just do it a little bit and then we can talk a little bit more. So coming up, and don't worry about picking your foot up. Let's just focus on the feeling of getting the whole body to open as you expand your wings. So you want the breath to fill the whole body. Let your breath be the open channel let your body be the open channel that the breath can flow through. So as you're doing this, notice that when everything expands, it tends to create an inhale. And when everything focuses back into the center, it tends to also create an exhale. So just do this a little bit and feel how the whole body fills and releases as you go through the motions. So we know that the breath is supposed to be abdominal breathing. And one of the first places that we close off that channel for the breath is in our abdomen. If you hold in your belly or create tightness in there, you won't be able to fill the dantian with your breath. So really try to feel that you're breathing down from the belly and letting it expand. We'll do this a couple more times, just focusing there. One more round. And take a break. Jane used to have us sometimes lie down on our backs on the floor with our knees up and our feet on the ground to just breathe and feel how the belly can fill, and that when the belly fills, you should also be able to feel the lower back filling. I'm not going to get down on the floor. I don't know where you're watching this, but if you want, you can try it. Get down on the floor. It's an easier place to feel the breath. But let's just stand in the opening posture and bend your knees a little bit and really feel that when you inhale, your belly can expand and your lower back can also release and expand. That feeling is where you want to start looking at the breath. Now I know that there's 4 breath words that Professor Chung used: long, fine, quiet, and slow. Those describe how your breath is when you're doing good Taiji breathing. It's not what you do. You don't try to make your breath be really long and work on what it means to be each of those things and focus on trying to make that happen. What you want to do instead is try to open up the body so that your whole torso can be like an open tube, an open channel, and you can let the breath fill there. And from there, you can discover what it means to have your breath be long, fine, quiet, and slow. But what you do is open up your body, and particularly the torso. So now that you've been looking at your belly and your lower back, I want to also look at what happens if your shoulders come up. So as you keep standing here, and then we'll do the crane again a little more. As you keep standing here, notice that if your shoulders come up, it kind of also cuts off your breath. But when we say that you should drop the shoulders and feel them down in your feet, that also does not mean that you push them down. So go ahead and push them down and get that feeling. And what you'll notice is a lot of tension and tightness through here. And when you do that, you also close off your breathing. You might be able to breathe down in your belly, but it won't make its way up into the upper body. And in fact, it will clamp down on the muscles that allow your rib cage to expand a little bit with your breath. So stand here again for a minute. Relax your belly, relax your lower back. A little bit of bend in your knees will help you relax the lower back. Let the arms be really loose, so you're not holding them up, but you're not pushing them down either. And just feel how when you start breathing down in your belly, it can find its way all the way up into your torso and expand the chest a little bit, as long as you keep a soft and open armpit nest, as I've heard it called. And feel how that makes everything have a slight give. The whole body does a little bit of breathing. So just do that a time or two. And see if you can get that feeling. And now let's do the crane again, and notice that where you take your arms to, how they move, that if you pull them back, that will also get in the way of the breathing. So nice, soft, armpit nest is open, chest is soft, everything is relaxed and released. And then the breath that begins in your belly can find its way up through your torso. And developing that open channel is an important piece of discovering what those 4 breath words entail. And now notice that if you do too much with your arms, go ahead and pull back and tighten across here and try to bring your shoulder blades back, how that effectively cuts off the breath. So you don't want that to happen. So pay careful attention to how you open in a way that keeps you able to allow the breath to fill the whole chamber of your upper torso. So it always starts down in here, but it should be able to fill its way up. And as your arms come up, notice how high they want to be and still stay open. And you can try bringing them up just a little bit higher and notice how that also cuts off that open channel. So look for that place that you can stay soft and open. Letting the breath expand through the body. And one of the things that the breath can tell you is where you have tension. Because if you can't get the breath, say, into your chest, you might be holding it closed. And so you can use the breath to help you find places to let go of. So let's do this just a little bit longer. One more round. Really feeling that inhale and the exhale. And now let's do a first third. And I want you to really just keep coming back to being able to get that feeling through the torso and noticing any place that you're holding on and creating tension and keeping the breath from being able to fill your body. And go ahead. Just breathing naturally. Beware if you're holding your breath. But don't force it. Softening the belly and the lower back. Softening the chest and around the armpits. And then stand here a moment, because part of the question about the breath was, well, what if you're not moving, if you're just doing standing? So I want you to stand here and just let your body feel open so that your breath really fills it. Feel your whole torso like a nice open tube that when you inhale fills and when you exhale releases. And feel how the whole body expands slightly on the inhale, and just let it help you soften on the exhale. And we'll take 3 more good breaths before we stop. And close. So one of the points that I think Ben was making when he said the form gives your breath a place to go is that if you just breathe naturally and practice the form diligently, over time your breath will coordinate with the shapes and the movements, that the form will effectively breathe you. Just like when we do the crane and your arms open and it makes more space up here, breath naturally wants to come in and create an inhale. So that feeling of the shape that your body makes allows the breath to come in and release. That's the same idea that happens as you do the form. But you can't force it. They're all really clear. Professor says it, Ben says it, everybody, all the teachers we've ever worked with, you cannot force the breath. It's this weird thing between conscious and unconsciousness, and we don't want to try to take control over it. So what you really want to just focus on is letting the body be open, noticing where you're unable to get the body open, where the breath can't flow. See if you can't figure out how to release it. And often, if something's stuck and you can just find a way to breathe into it, it will help it relax. So you can use it as a helpful tool, but you definitely do not want to control the breath. So I want to do another form, and first, third, just that much. And really focus on, I won't say very much, but I want you to just focus on going through the motions, not being in a hurry, letting each movement play out and lead to the next one, and just keep breathing. I'm not going to give you any directives about your breath, except don't hold your breath, let it keep breathing, and don't try to control it. If you think, oh, this is an expansive move, I should be inhaling, but I'm exhaling, I better... Just let go of any of those ideas. Just breathe naturally. Try to release your belly so you can, and your lower back so that your breath can fill the dantian. Try to stay soft so that your breath can make its way through. Standing here a moment and just feeling open and breathing. Jane would always say to us, breathing and relaxing. And go. So that's some of the stuff about the breath, do keep coming back to being relaxed in your breathing. And you will find that breathing deep into your abdomen and, letting it fill you will actually relax you. So they kind of go together. And I'll turn it over to Lee, who can give us some more instruction.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Breathing. So Beth talked about Jane having us lie on the floor and put our hands on our abdomens and feel the belly expanding when we inhaled and releasing when we exhaled. And then also doing the same thing, feeling it in the kidneys area. Expanding when you inhale. Doing the opposite of expanding when you exhale. We tend to not say contracting there, because contracting gets the image of muscles tightening. And so we tend to say releasing, but the belly will get bigger. You'll feel an expansion in the kidneys when you inhale, and the belly will get smaller. You'll feel the lower back kidney area falling in when you exhale. And she would usually introduce this by saying, I do this about once a year. We never put it on a calendar, so I don't know actually how often she would do it. But I think that's one of the things that you want to keep in mind. It's really good to do some breath work. And the Qigong, the 5 animal frolics are an example of a Qigong set. The 18 therapies are. A bunch of the stuff we do are examples of Qigong sets. And Qigong could be literally translated as breath work. So doing some breath work is a good thing. But I want to underscore the thing Beth said about do not try to control your breath. You really want to just let it happen. And use your breath as like a diagnostic. We were taught to watch the breath. And watching is very different from controlling or forcing. Sometimes you watch things that you don't like to see. We've had plenty of that in 2020. Other times you watch things that you do like to see, but you don't, by watching, force it or control it. And so be really, really careful. We're treating you as adults, and we're going to give you some breath instruction. But when we give you that, that's something to watch and observe, not something to try to do. Trying to control the breath can lead to all kinds of negative results. It can be bad for you. So don't do it. Don't try to control the breath. As we work on some more things about the breath, they'll often be a diagnostic for other things that are happening. So when your breath gets caught up in the chest and you actually can't reach the abdomen, that's a diagnostic that's telling you haven't relaxed. When you're tight in the armpits and the shoulders and the breath can't actually become full, that's a diagnostic telling you that you need to relax this stuff. So rather than, even though I'm holding tight, I'm going to force my belly out, I'm going to make things happen. Notice that your breath is no longer thin, long, calm, and slow. And use that to figure out what it is you're doing. Now there's a bunch of different ways that you can breathe. The whole torso is, like all the parts of our bodies, complicated. And so you can get breath in and do various things. The basic Tai Chi breathing that we do is abdominal breathing. And the way that works, I think it can be useful to understand, is the diaphragm is about here. And in its relaxed state, the diaphragm is anchored further down in your body, and it comes up and it makes a dome shape. When you breathe in, the muscles in the diaphragm contract, and they actually pull that dome down. And what that does is the dome gets pulled down, your lungs increase in volume, and air comes in. When you let go, the diaphragm goes back to its default state. So the contraction of the diaphragm brings it down. The release of the diaphragm lets it come back. So it's when we're expanding the abdomen, we're actually contracting the diaphragm. Now the diaphragm's not very innervated, so you won't, it's difficult to feel. So, but it can really help to know the shape that's happening. It's like this as I exhale, and as I inhale, the diaphragm comes down, and as I exhale, the diaphragm releases and comes back up. And I inhale, The diaphragm comes down, I exhale, the diaphragm releases and comes back up. And so the reason that your belly expands on the inhale is because the diaphragm at the top of all the internal organs here is coming down, and this stuff has to go somewhere. And so basically as the diaphragm drops, it pushes your belly out because it's got to go somewhere. And as the diaphragm releases, everything can come back in. Now, you can fight against that. You can tighten your lower abdomen and make it harder for the diaphragm to come down and come back up and not allow the belly to expand. And when you do that, you'll force yourself into chest breathing rather than abdominal breathing. So go ahead, let your belly hang out. Don't try to restrict it at all. And then as you breathe in, the diaphragm will be coming down, the belly will expand. As you breathe out, the belly will release, the diaphragm will release and come back up. So there's this kind of a thing happening on the inhale and the exhale. So that's all happening in there. The other thing that Beth mentioned that can be useful to understand is that there's muscles that come around from the back underneath the shoulder blades and attach to the ribs here. And as the diaphragm contracts, those muscles also contract. And what that does is it lifts the ribs and it actually makes more space. And then as the diaphragm releases, those muscles also release, and that lets the ribs fall. So even when you're doing abdominal breathing, the ribs will be involved too. And so the other place that Beth talked about how you can short circuit the breathing is if you lift the shoulders so that those muscles are already engaged and they can't do their job of raising the ribs, or if you force the shoulders down so that everything's engaged and they can't do their job of lifting the ribs, or if you tighten underneath the armpits, eggs under the armpits actually keeps you from doing that. But if you tighten here, again, you're tightening all that, and then the upper chest, the ribs, can't be involved in it. So letting all this stuff go, and go ahead and put a hand on your belly and a hand on your upper chest, and just do some breathing. And notice that as you breathe in, the belly expands, the chest rises slightly. As you breathe out, the chest falls, the belly comes back in. Again, these are results, not something you try to do. You don't try to lift the chest, and you don't try to force the belly out. In 21st century Western culture, very few people are going to try to force their bellies out. But, that's not what you do. What you do is you let the belly expand, let the ribs lift, let the belly come back, and let the ribs fall. So there's a out and up on the inhale, a falling and a coming back in towards the center on the exhale. And then you can also change and put one of your hands on the lower back and notice that as you breathe in, you should feel a slight expansion across the kidney area. And as you breathe out, you let that release. This is the same thing. As the diaphragm comes down, it makes this get bigger because it's pushing it out. As the diaphragm releases, this can fall back into its natural space. And so this is really about allowing the body to work. We're a little bit of anatomy nerds, and part of that is because actually understanding how all the pieces go together can help you use the body efficiently. There was a famous groundbreaking book written by Mabel Todd in the 30s called The Thinking Body. And her thesis was that the way you think about your body influences the way it works. That the body will try to implement what you're telling it to do. And if your notions about how the body fits together are incorrect, the body will do its best to try to fit what your incorrect notion is, as opposed to the thinking body that actually corresponds to the way the body is put together, and it can move more efficiently. An example I sometimes use is the elbow. Everybody knows where their elbow joints are. And so when you say bend the elbow, we give very clear instructions to our bodies about how to bend the elbow. If we were confused and we thought our elbow joint was in the middle of our forearm and you tried to bend there, then the body will try to do something. So just go ahead and do that. Visualize that what you're trying to do is make it as if your arm bent in the middle of the forearm. And now visualize actually bending the elbow, because you know where the elbow is. You're giving your body much clearer instructions when you tell it to bend in the elbow, where the elbow actually is, than when you tell it to try to bend in the a place that the elbow isn't. An example we use all the time for this is the hip joints, because people don't know where their hip joints are. The hip joints are in here, right? The femur comes up, and then it comes over into the pelvis. The socket of the pelvis is sitting there. The hip joints themselves, if you put your hand across the front of your pelvis, middle finger pointing right down the middle of the pelvis, your thumb and middle finger will go right into the hip joints. That's the moving part. A lot of us think the hip joints are out here. And so when we're doing something like the bear, we'll end up trying to turn out here. And so I can tell my body that I want it to be as if the turn is out here on the superstructure that floats outside the actual hip joints, or I can let the thinking body do its job and actually turn over the real hip joints. And it's very different when you actually turn on the real hip joints versus these made-up hip joints. Then everything goes more efficiently. And so the same thing with the breathing. If you understand that what's happening is the diaphragm is coming down on an inhale, which expands the lower abdomen, and releasing on an exhale, then you won't be tempted to suck the belly in. If you understand that the ribs raise slightly on an inhale and release on an exhale, you'll let that happen. So let's do another first third. And I want you to just watch the breath and watch the places where you allow the belly to expand naturally and come back in naturally, where you allow the ribs to rise naturally and fall naturally on the exhale, and the places that are very 2020 where you don't let that happen, where you hold, where you're making a difficult step. That's very easy. If we get to a big step here and you tighten and hold your breath while you step, that's not letting the belly naturally expand, naturally release. So another first third, watching the breath. And go ahead. Watching the breath. Belly expands on the inhale, releases on the exhale. Ribs raise slightly on the inhale, release and fall on the exhale. So, another thing that I want to bring to your attention is the tendency to hold your breath. And we will often hold our breath when we're doing something difficult. So it's, when you're like taking one of the big steps, and you come through here, this is an easy place to hold your breath, tighten the abdomen, and step. So each inhale should just immediately be connected to the next exhale. At the end of the exhale, right away there's another inhale. So there isn't a break. I don't come up to the top of the inhale and hold my breath even for a microsecond, and then breathe out, get down, lungs empty, stop at the bottom, come back up. It should feel continuous as it goes through there, like a wave that's going all the way through the body. Now, it is true that anatomically there are two very minor pauses in the breathing. The body does have a very minor pause at the end of an inhale before the start of the next exhale, and a slightly smaller pause between the end of an exhale and the start of the next inhale. So you want to, if you measured the breath, you would see tiny, tiny little pauses in there. But those are short enough that they are below our conscious awareness in general. You have to be very, very, very aware of your breath to be able to find those. So if you find yourself with even a slight break between an inhale and the next exhale, or a slight break between an exhale and the next inhale, that's an error. You're holding your breath. Ask me again in 6 years of diligently working on this and say that you can perceive that very minor pause, and great, awesome. But for now, you don't want any of those pauses. So we're going to do another first third, and I want you to watch every time you go from an inhale to an exhale, and from an exhale to an inhale, and be really assiduous and see if you held your breath at all. And watch for them in difficult places. I've used going into single whip as an example a couple times now. Coming from a shoulder strike into white crane is another one where, because the feet are at 90 degrees and you're turning, it's really easy to hold the breath for a second, try to get all this stuff right. So look for any of those places where you hold the breath, even a little bit, and the answer is to relax and just let the breath continue. So another first third. Before we start, actually we've already started, before we start moving, watch the breath, watch the inhales and the exhales, linked together without any break. The end of each inhale is the start of the next exhale. The end of each exhale is the start of the next inhale. And begin. Each inhale linked immediately to the next exhale. Each exhale immediately followed by the next inhalation. Letting the breath flow on uninterrupted, even as we do technically challenging moves. Relax. So now be honest with yourself. Did you hold your breath during that? Did you notice, or did you space out while we were doing the form? If you noticed, did you find any places where you held your breath? There were two places I noticed myself holding my breath. One of them was coming back from lifting hands. As I turned back here, I lost my balance a little bit, and I had to put my foot down. And in that moment, my body tightened, and I held my breath. It was for short. You may not have noticed me doing it, but I had a little moment of and then it's going on. So that was one where noticing that I was holding my breath gave me a clue that I'd actually lost my balance a little bit. And so I work on that by working on my balance, working on my shape, getting that better, rather than by trying to force the breath. But the breath was a diagnostic. The second was when I got to the punch. I was really quite enjoying the punch, and I wanted this moment to last. And so I held my breath a little bit because I really quite enjoyed getting to that punch there, and I wanted to hold on to it. And, if there's one thing this practice teaches us, it's that, you can't hold on. Everything happens. You just got to keep going with it. So next time I do the punch in another 3 or 4 minutes or so, I'm going to try to really let it come to its completion and release it immediately, not trying to stop the stream, grasp everything, and keep it the way I like it. So you may have had, well, I'm sure you had different experiences. They may have happened at the same time that mine were, and they may have been something else entirely, and you may have just missed it. So that's the breath as a diagnostic. Now, there are 4 words that Professor Chung applied to the breath, and the 4 words are Shi, Chang, Jing, Man. And so I'll talk about those. Shi is a word that means thin or fine. And so you'll hear us, when we talk about these, we'll sometimes use not always the same English word. We'll be thinking about shi and we'll say thin or we'll say fine. It's a picture of silk threads. And so it refers to something that is finely worked, is a thin stream, is the exact opposite of rough and clumsy. A fine cloth, a small stream of water, and in particular, shishin, thin mind, fine mind, is a description of a meditative state where your consciousness is unbroken, where it's threaded with fine silk threads, no breaks. So when the breath is thin, it certainly means that it's not rough and ragged. You put your finger underneath your nose, you're not going to feel big, rough, ragged things coming out of the nose. It's thin and fine. So you want to watch for that. You want to watch when the breath gets thick and heavy and rough, and that's a diagnostic that tells you need to relax. And the next one, Chang, is long. So it's in long life. It means big, expansive in both time and space. And so fast breaths would not be long. Short breaths, which is what tends to happen if you're in your chest, are not long. A long breath actually fills the whole body, and it takes time to do that. Chuang-Tzu, the sage, said that the realized human, the true person, breathes down to their heels. And so that's an aspect of the long breath. And so when we're doing this, start out, with a hand on your belly and a hand on your lower back, and feel that your breaths are vastly expansive in time and space, filling the body. Long, long, filling the whole body. Not just long in time, but actually going every place. Feel the perineum hui-yin place here at the exact bottom of your crotch. And as the abdomen comes down, you should actually feel an expansive pressure there in the area right at the bottom of your crotch. And now try to feel it as you do this, going all the way down your legs to your heels. So you actually feel that. Now obviously the air doesn't reach your heels except via your bloodstream. But you should feel a slight pressurization all the way down into the feet as you breathe. Diaphragm comes down, the body gets pressurized all the way down to the feet. You release, everything lets go. You feel it all the way down into your heels. You release, everything lets go. Take a push. And try to feel it all the way to the hearts of your palms. So that as you inhale, you feel a fullness that goes right to the Laogung, heart of the palm place. And as you exhale, you let everything go. So the breath is long in time and space, filling the whole body. The breath is also Jing, calm, quiet, tranquil. And so there's a pair of polar opposites, like yin-yang, empty and full. And they are Jing and Dung. Jing is quiescence, quietude, calmness. And so when we say the mind should be calm in the Dantian, we're saying the mind should be Jing in the Dantian. And it's the opposite of Dung, moving, active. So there's a saying in Tai Chi of stillness within motion. And so you want to have that calmness, that quiescence, even as you're moving. And so the breath has that too. The breath is calm. That's the word I tend to say for it. And a name for meditation is calm thoughts. So a frequent image is of a pond, and you drop a pebble into the pond. And as the pebble falls into the pond, there's little ripples and disturbances in the pond that then calm and quiet down. And so that doesn't mean that if wind is blowing or an animal is swimming in the pond over there, there won't be ripples. It's not frozen and solid, but it's calm. It's not storm-tossed. And so even as we're in the form or we're in our lives, we want to try to have that, the pebble has fallen into the pond, and now everything calms. We want to try to have that calm feeling in our breath, and when Professor Chung actually talked about these 4 breath words, he specifically applied them to the qi, the internal energy, which is synonymous often, but not always, with the breath. There's another word, hu shi, that is specific about respiration, where we talk about inhaling and exhaling. He applied these to the qi. So we get at it by working on our breath and letting the breath become fine, expansive in space and time, calm, quiescent, and gradual, easy, slow. We work on the breath there, and that gradually makes our qi take those same aspects. And then the last one is man, which means gradual, easy, slow. So fast breath is not it. Catching your breath, getting caught, and having to work, that is not it either. Professor Chung, we're told, would in New York frequently tell somebody who was working on something, man, gradually, take it easy. So you want your breath to be taking it easy. If you're working hard and you're having to catch your breath, that is not man. So giving it a nice, easy, let it just happen. So thin, long, calm, and slow. Now, these aren't things you do to the breath. You don't try to make it long. You don't try to say, okay, stopwatch, how long can I exhale for? Oops, only 7 seconds. Okay, next time, how long can I make my inhale go? And now I'm going to do 9 seconds for the exhale. No, you don't do that. What'll happen is you'll notice your breath has gotten thick, or you'll notice that your breath is short, or you'll notice that your breath is no longer calm, it's storm-tossed, or you'll notice that you're having to catch your breath, you're chasing after it. And so that tells you that breath is a diagnostic there, and that tells you that something is wrong somewhere else. And of course we know it's wrong. You're not relaxed. So you relax somewhere else, and that'll return the qi in the breath to fine, expansive, quiescent, taking it easy. So let's do one more first third and just take it easy. Let everything be calm, expansive in time and space, fine, thin, carefully worked, highest quality. One more. And go. Letting the whole body relax so that the breath can be like silk threads. Very fine, very thin. Letting the body, mind, and energy relax so that the breath and the chi can be long, expansive in space, filling the whole body, expansive in time without breaks between inhale and exhale. Relaxing the whole body so that the breath is still, calm, the heart of stillness within your movement. Letting the body, mind, and internal energy relax completely. So the breath is easy, taking it easy. Slow, gradual. Thin, long, calm, and slow. Great, take a break. Okay, so I got two more things. One of them is that what Beth started with, that the form creates the channels that when you pour the water out onto the ground, it flows in the channels. The form creates the shapes that the breath goes through. And so the form breathes you. So people will sometimes ask us for breathing patterns, and we will almost never give them. And the reason we don't give them is because as soon as we give you a breathing pattern, people will make that happen, and they'll be forcing the breath. We give you a breathing pattern on this first one. And that's about it. There is a very distinct rationale for how the breath matches to the form, and we'll give you clues on that, but we really don't tell you inhale here, exhale there. Because if we do, we know you, just like I would make that happen, because I want to get it right. So we're not going to tell you that. What I will do is I'll give you a little bit of homework. And so your homework, before our next class where we'll work on this some more, is to figure out, do you start the form on an inhale or an exhale? And so I want you to observe over these next days, is the very first thing you do in the form on an inhale or an exhale. And I'm not going to tell you one's right or one's wrong. And it's very likely that you won't remember. You'll end up someplace doing the form. You'll be, oh yeah, right, I was supposed to think about whether I started on an inhale or an exhale. And bringing that awareness to when you start the form is as important as what answer you find. So do you start the form on an inhale or an exhale? And do you remember that you're trying to figure that out? And then the other thing is a reminder that we will not do these sessions next week. Of course, since they're video, you can always rewatch and do anything you want. But we'll take next week off. So we've got today's and we've got Thursdays, and then we'll take a week off and we'll pick up the week after that. And so, thank you very much.